So everybody unmute yourself and give Kenny McDonald a warm Rotary welcome. Hi, Kenny.
Hey, Kenny.
Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I appreciate your whole too, because I would be good fodder for that.
Yeah, this is Rotary.
I don't know if we have the ability to pull up the presentation that I sent over to you guys, but whoever's running can feel free to do it unless you want me to do it.
I got it, Kenny. Let me.
Scott's going to get it.
Okay, good. Then you don't have to look at my face. That's even better. Well, Mike, I appreciate the call we had last Friday because I actually went back into some presentations I was making at the beginning of the year before this pandemic hit and all of this crisis hit. And it kind of recalibrated me too. We got to stay focused on our plan and how we're thinking about the future. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the vision that we created at the end of the last decade, why I think that may be more important than ever in these times. I do have a few slides that give you a little indication of what we're going through and how we're looking at it. And then I'll just reinforce how I think, what we need to stick to get through this. So before I do that, I just want to say thank you to Rotary. I can't think of an organization that's more important in a time like this worldwide than Rotary and all that you do to help communities and lift people up and simply get people together in our communities. So thank you for that. If we can advance the slide, that'd be great. We ended last decade not just changing our name, but we worked really, really hard on developing a vision for the community. And it may actually have a little bit more meaning 3 months into this decade than it did when we launched it last fall. And I got to be honest with you, as the leader of this, my dedication to this vision is unwavering. We think we have an opportunity to be the most prosperous place in the country. And what that would mean, not only are we growing, and some of our growth numbers are, at the end of last decade, we're skyrocketing. But are we also reducing some of the numbers that we want to reduce? And we have inequities in health and education, and wealth in our community and in our region that have stubbornly stayed the same or only went down marginally as we've grown like never before over the last decade. And we think we have an opportunity to, by working together across the entire metro area, 11 counties, with all the public officials, and more importantly, maybe the private sector, to get after both of those things simultaneously and improve things. We've all been reading that, I think people are taking it as a given that we're going to have a worse outcome at the end of this for those fortunate in our community. And I also acknowledge that, but sort of reject that notion. So as I think about what we're going to have to do to grow our economy, to get back on our feet, I think we have a great opportunity to actually close some of those gaps right now, like never before. And there's a lot of the digital divide, all those things that keep people back from working in our economy. Next slide, please. So I was using a few pictures I used this at a couple of presentations, but I thought I'd bring it back up because we are living through historic times. So these are 4 photographs from roughly 1920. In your top right or corner is the corner of Front and Broad Street, where the Levesque Tower was built. So that's what it looked like in 1920. And some ambitious leaders in our community decided they wanted to build one of the tallest buildings in the world. And 1920 was an interesting year. We started to build our airport, which is down in your bottom right-hand corner. That's what our airport looked like. And by looking at the numbers here lately, I think that we have about as many flights as we did then out of there right now. But you know, again, we had leaders saying we want to be a big city, and we're going to build an airport terminal, and we're going to forge ahead. You can see the stadium, Ohio Stadium, just being built, starting in 1920. The game hadn't been played there yet, but the shoe was being put up, steel was being erected, and obviously High Street looked a little different. And we had public transportation up and down. I don't see a lot of social distancing going on along that street, but it sure looks good to me that we have. I can't wait till we get back to all that activity. That's what things look like in 1920 for the people that were leading the community then. And they had their own challenges, and they were big ones, and we have our own. And we should be reinforced and burdened by those people that went before us. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So you can see with the background that I have on the great city that skyline that we have, and nearly 100 years later, what we turned all these pictures into. Can we push the slide ahead? Thanks.
Oh, the stadium.
I can't wait till we can get that sea of red together. Oh, go back one, please. See, you see a full Buckeye Stadium. I can't wait till we can do that. I can't wait to get on a plane again. There's that Levesque Tower that we just talked about that looks a little different than that old house that they had on the corner there. In the short north, I think one of the best streets in the entire country, and it'll rise again as well as we get back to work. Please advance. But I did want to give you a little insight into how we're looking at some of the numbers that we're looking at. From an unemployment standpoint, I look at 11 counties, so everything within about an hour of the Columbus airport. And we just did this breakdown week by week over the last 40 days or so. And you can see we have some real differences. You know, the Columbus region as a whole, we've started to see those unemployment claims a little bit. But in places like Logan County, Morrow County, Union County, Honda is a big part of the economy. As suppliers of furloughed people and things like that, the unemployment rate really spiked up, and they're hurting. It gives you a little regional perspective of how we're working through this. Next slide, please. So our job postings have went down nearly 51% since January. Now, I wanted to show this because I think it's important to remember how strong we were in January and we were, as a region. We had never been stronger. More people were working in this region than ever in our history. Our companies were thriving. We were bringing in all kinds of new ones, and and that's still happening. Obviously, 51% is a huge drop, but there are still job postings. And there's still a skills gap, in fact, when we go to hire for some of the people that are doing well during this crisis. We have to just continue to remember to work on the workforce, and that there's still opportunity as we go through this. Next slide, please. So it's interesting who's hiring, and this has changed a little bit week by week as we went through this. Some certain people have hiring freezes, or they might be furloughing different types of people in different groups that they have. We do have, even some of the companies on the right are actually healthy. Battelle and Giant Eagle and JP Morgan Chase and Ohio State is not going anywhere. But you can see that, in healthcare and in distribution, those people that are delivering things to our doorsteps and stuff like that are flying off the shelves. Really interesting. Dollar General is growing like crazy. They're putting up their distribution center here. We're helping them hire people every day, taking people from the retail sector and even the restaurant community and putting them to work in jobs like that, at least in the short term. I hope they can get back to what they like to do, which is hospitality. But there's a lot going on, and we're trying to break it down and look at it a lot of different ways. Next slide, please. So you can see that, again, healthcare, distribution, delivery, truck driving, packagers, things like that are kind of exploding and staying consistent. And then we've had other things actually, even physician demand has went down as the demand for elective surgery has went down, oddly enough, in this. Sales reps and things like that were hit pretty hard. And obviously those that work in the hospitality industry, even teachers and things like that have changed quite a bit. So we're breaking this down. Tech losses, things like that, higher value things are kind of on pause right now. And lower value things, lower wage things are increasing. We hope that starts to even out and stabilize over the coming months. Next slide, please. So, we've been looking all over the world for examples, and we went right back to the source of this for one thing, which is to look at what's going on in China and how they're rebounding. So I like to show this because we can kind of see that there's another side to this. So, I think their crisis took, full-blown 4 to 5 months before these numbers started to switch over and be positive again. But you can see that their retail goods and things like that are growing again and getting larger, even if they're nowhere near where they were before. They're positive. And we're going to get out of negative territory if we get people back to work and we get some health solutions being developed. It's important for us to keep the future in mind as we work through this. Next slide, please. This is just another example of that by companies. So they're, these numbers are still negative and they're down from where they were, but they're starting to sell, iPhones again. They're starting to sell cars again. People are starting to go back to buy clothing and their Starbucks. And we're going to see a little bit of the same thing as we get back to work here. Again, we got to kind of look to the future. Somebody who's 4 or 5 months ahead of this in this process is China. Go ahead. And then we can see our stock prices. It's interesting. We've talked to hundreds and hundreds of our companies across our region. And in fact, we're talking to hundreds and more actually outside of our region around the world to try to get a handle on, what's working, what's growing, and what's not. Amazon, obviously, it's great that they have so many people in our region now. 6 years ago, they didn't have anybody in Ohio that officially worked for Amazon. And I think they're up to almost 13,000 people that work in Ohio now, with about 1,000 people that work in cloud computing here, and then thousands more in our region that work in distribution. ICMA is the old Roxanne, the old Roxanne, and they're growing asthma drugs. Abbott Laboratories has never stopped and is growing. Scott's is doing really well. And we have other people that are, growing during this crisis. We also have people that are hurting a lot. People associated with the retail industry like Ascena and Macy's down in Cincinnati. Alliance Data is a great partner of ours. Express, they're down, but they're switching their business over to online, and some are seeing some life in that. Their stock prices are down, but their companies are continuing to operate and move forward. Please advance. So again, when we look at our economy and the big levers of the economy, we don't break it into big business and small business. We just look at the things that really drive new money coming into our region in a sustainable way. Obviously, we're one of the biggest automotive centers in the country, with Honda and some 200 plus manufacturing companies sort of tied to them across our region. It's really important that we get Honda back up and running. Right now, they're suffering not just because of the crisis, but the demand in automotive is obviously down significantly. Getting them back and running over the next several months is going to be huge for our region and, quite frankly, for the country. Retail brands and technologies that go into that, because we have so many retailers that are headquartered here. We have to watch this industry really carefully. And while we're not watching the stores quite as much, we are watching, what happens at headquarters and what they're investing in. So we're seeing growth in those companies down at Rickenbacker, where they're delivering goods around the country, maybe around the world, and in their where they're spending in technology. Finance and insurance, we're really lucky to not just have companies like Nationwide and Grange and Safe Auto and State Auto and all the insurance companies, JP Morgan Chase and Huntington headquartered here, but Klarna and Root Insurance and a bunch of younger companies that are growing like crazy and are going to help us get through this as well. So finance and insurance is kind of a safe harbor for us right now. E-commerce is growing like crazy. Obviously, we're getting everything delivered to our homes, and that's not happening through magic. That is hard people in technology going to work and delivering that stuff. Columbus is going to remain one of the biggest centers in the country. We started to grow a lot last year in biomedical and health services, when you're going to see continued advancement in this, not just because of the pandemic, but we're becoming a center for gene therapy and cell therapy and some very advanced things that are going to create jobs and possibly cause us to put some new buildings up in our near Ohio State and things like that. It's going to be a boom industry for the time being, and Columbus is going to get part of that. Finally, the major cloud computing centers that Amazon and Google and Facebook are putting up in our region are the reason that we can do these kinds of calls. And all this computing power that's allowing us to get together virtually when we can't get together physically is in part because of places like Columbus, Ohio, which is one of the largest advanced computing places in the world now. And we continue to see growth in that area. In fact, we're going to see quite a bit more growth over the next 18 months. And I'm glad that we have that industry. Brought it about 7 years ago, and it's growing like crazy. Next slide, please. These slides just give you a little bit more detail. I'll forward this to everybody, so I won't go through each one of them. Can we forward 2 more slides? There we go. So I'll go through these really briefly, but there were 6 principled strategies when we started in January that we were hammering on. And as I go back to them, they're as true today as they were then, and they're going to be true tomorrow. The first order of business for us in economic development is make sure that we're taking care of the existing businesses we have. Virtually all we've done since the crisis began is to start to reach out to companies, and that whether that's helping them get their federal relief packages, or it's helping them work through all the myriad of essential, non-essential, or the go back to work policies, and then certainly helping to advocate for them here in Columbus as well as in Washington, based on their industry and what they have to do, has been critical. And I'm convinced that if we keep working with them and we're hand in glove with our existing businesses, we're going to create the most competitive businesses in the world. Next slide, please. Oddly enough, we've seen actually quite a bit of activity in attracting new businesses. So there are companies that are doing quite well during this and are making investments, and they're looking for new places to do business. We've started to host virtual site visits for companies on a weekly basis now that are sending us RFPs from around the world and asking how Columbus and our region can actually help serve them in the future. We know that we're going to have some companies fail, but we knew that before the crisis, and we're going to have to continue to attract businesses and be one of the most competitive places in the country. In fact, we think the competition for new business in the future is going to be insane. And it's going to be, it's already crazy, competing with all these other cities. But given the depth of this crisis, it's going to cause lots of states and cities to get uber competitive, and we got to keep working to become a great place for new businesses to set up. Next slide, please. Third, and I think this is really critical, is that we continue to focus on helping companies get started here. And, you know, it's counterintuitive, but some of the biggest and best companies in the world were started during recessions and even at the height of the Great Depression. And we're seeing ambitious entrepreneurs change their business overnight. We're seeing all the ingenuity and innovative practices that they put to work every day happening right here in our region. And we got to put fuel on that fire. We got to make sure that they have the money, they get the care and nurturing that they need. And we're going to do everything we can to support a number of things that actually help our startup community grow here. And we've got a great one. We've got success stories all over the place. And they're some of the companies that are doing the best during this crisis because they're so nimble and agile. Next slide, please. You know, the pandemic has not only hit companies in our business sector, but it's hit our communities really hard too. And their revenue is going to be down. But we're really committed to doing everything we can to control how prepared we are for the future. Whether that means, you know, working on infrastructure or our policies on paper that allow us to be competitive. We've got to be ready to go every day. And in particular, we're going to have to make investments today so that we're ready to go when this economy is at full throttle again. And we can take full advantage of the manufacturing renaissance and all those other things that we're going to see in our economy. Just two more. Please advance. One is we've got to continue to market the Columbus region. I mean, one thing that I've been really proud of is that we've continued to reach out to national and international publications because we've had so many great stories to tell of our companies investing in our communities and doing awesome things like Battelle, Cardinal Health, our great healthcare systems we have in this region, and their ingenuity that they've practiced under and their collaborative nature as we work through this. Those are all stories we want the world to know. And we're going to see a bit of a flood of people out of New York and maybe some of the coasts and maybe some of the larger cities as we go through this. We want Columbus, Ohio to be where those people and those companies land. And finally, my last slide is to just make sure that we're not backing away from the globe. We have practices, we have partners all over the world. In fact, some really great ones. Every week we have a weekly call with our partners in the UK, Italy, Germany, and Japan. And they're going through the same thing we are. And they're going through many of the same issues. And we got to remember that they're great partners and we have great relationships culturally and everything else with those parts of the world that we need to leverage as we go through this and continue to not only let them know that we want to continue to be their partner, but we want them to continue to invest and be a partner here in our region. And then I'll just end with my last slide is the vision again, because I if anything, I'd like you to walk away with, that vision in mind. That the big question that we have is whether we can be the most prosperous place in the country. And I really believe that we can. We're going to have to do things really differently now. We're already doing them pretty differently. I feel like we've got a couple arms tied behind our back as we go through this, but we'll come out swinging when we can. And I just appreciate the opportunity, Mike, and everybody on the call for your partnership and support during this. And I hope this gives you a little color on how we're going to approach things.
Thank you.